Wow. So I wasn't quite expecting this outcome. For one thing, I thought you would have all wanted to see me slash open Love and Monsters without a second thought, but apparently not. But it wasn't even a close match like the last one. This is a fucking landslide. Maybe this means I've captured the hearts of those who genuinely think the show was better before the Moffat takeover, and now everyone wants a dissection of the best episodes. I don't know. What I do know, however, is that I'm very excited to talk about these two episodes. It's another one of those stories where the Doctor and companion get stuck in a base, whilst the members of the crew slowly get picked off with several spiritual and scientific references laid within the themes of the story. Surprisingly, the show never really fails to impress me with these kind of episodes, so let's jump into this review without another moment wasted. Take it away, Carl. The size of the cupboard they arrive in and the awkward camera angle of the initial shot foreshadows the idea of a claustrophobic setting that resides throughout this story. The Doctor and Rose have a little giggle about the prospect of the TARDIS's discomfort. This amusement reflects the Doctor and Rose's time together, now allowing them to mock the idea of danger, which is quite an interesting starting point for the episode since danger is constantly looming over and beneath them throughout. The laughter is seen later from Rose reacting to the striking image of "Welcome to Hell" written on the wall, only the confidence of the pair soon wears off as soon as they see what's written beneath is not translated by the TARDIS. The Doctor identifies, only too late now, that they should have upheld the advice of the TARDIS to pack their bags and go home. What's even worse is when the Doctor says,
"Deep space exploration, we've gone way out."
Out of what? Perceivable reality? Don't leave us hanging, Doc. This place is spooky enough as it is. This slow build-up of uncertainty allows for the Ood to appear just at the right moment, seeing as not only were we not expecting what was behind the door, but also because the lack of certainty there is with regards to the location. The horrific design of these creatures is just so captivating still to this day because they are just so fucked up. Bright red tentacles with bright red eyes, with a vocal device that's cabled up to... I don't even want to think about it, but that's the beauty of its design. It makes you wonder how on earth all its functions work. How does it eat? Is there a hole in there somewhere? I am unsurprised why they utilize these bad guys again and again throughout the rest of the Davies era because it's beautifully designed. It's a shame that these two episodes were the only ones where I ever felt the Ood were a threat to the characters, but they get all political with them in Series 4, and any other time they were used, they are shown as these super intelligent demigods who would sing from time to time. These two episodes that I'm analysing today, however, do attempt to address the Ood slavery, but unfortunately doesn't do a very detailed job at it. Perhaps this was to get another episode with the Ood made, but at the same time this vagueness does work in the plot's favour as it gets us to think about the possibility of a willing slave. Now, obviously to Western culture, slaves and slavery are straight out prohibited, and the thought of a willing slave is a contradiction. Therefore, I pose the question, what makes the Ood any different than a group of volunteers? That's what the show is asking by being deliberately vague on the issue in my opinion. To be honest, I wish they hadn't made any other Ood episodes just because they were the most menacing and powerful in this episode and Satan Pit. The Ood then pronounce their need to feed before the title credits roll. Now I know I've mumbled on a fuck ton already just based on the opening, but that is because it's that fucking good. Somebody who hasn't seen this episode before will have some questions waiting to be answered, drawing the audience in to find out more about this mystery base. Despite I said earlier the story structure isn't exactly original, the decision for this story to be set where it is displays a unique level of originality that lines up with the interest of contemporary science. Black holes are objects, or lack thereof, that are almost mythological, seeing as nobody has actually been into a black hole or has any idea of what comes out the other side, or even if there is another side to it. An anomaly in space rigorously studied, but only done so through observation and not experience. God and the devil, if we're going by the Judeo-Christian definition, are the exact opposite, because neither can be observed and yet are experienced by those devout to religion. Perhaps the beast and the black hole are representatives of an everlasting battle between the two, or perhaps a balance between them until one is shown to be nothing more than a driving force for evil, and then is swallowed whole by reason and science. I'm no philosopher, but these connotations connotations are brilliantly woven into the story, and Matt Jones did a damn good job on both episodes. His obsession with the afterlife, death, and religion would continue into Torchwood Series 2 with the episode Dead Man Walking. It's a shame he didn't write any more stories for the revival series, as his dark and sinister stories would have done a great job in the later series. I think the set design for the base is pretty great. It's interesting they managed to convince myself and many others how large the base is, despite probably using only one corridor set piece. The stakes rise even higher after the Doctor discovers his only way off the planet has now been sunk to the planet's core. This isolation is exemplified by the Doctor and Rose being left alone in this room to contemplate their situation, whilst the others carry out their work with Maurice Ravel's piece titled Bolero placed beneath the montage. The sound design of the episode is pretty good too, considering that it can prove on the one hand how this music can show the unrelenting determination of man at work on this impossible base, whilst consequently showing how little to no music at all can have the most horrifying effects on the viewers. Take the scenes with Toby and the Invisible Devil having a chat, for example, where an ominous yet almost perverted voice seems to echo around the room. This allows the imagination of the viewer to take over for a few seconds and imagine what kind of horror could be in the room with him, and what kind of psychological effect this has on Toby as the camera slowly, like the monster, reaches out for him. It's only when Toby turns around the music begins to build itself up again and explode when we see the writing on his hands. Once again, the show makes full use of voices that don't have sources to add a very chilling effect, like when the Ood speak of the beast rising from the pit in the canteen, and when the computer voice spontaneously says,
"He is awake,"
to add this uncomfortable atmosphere to the events at hand. The Doctor and Rose then have a rather sweet chat about settling down and getting a mortgage. Not quite sure why the two seem to behave so awkwardly around each other in this conversation, given the fact they're practically inseparable and this happened the previous year, but then again they're talking about normal and unadventurous things, which I can imagine is quite an awkward thing to talk about given the TARDIS is missing and you could fall into a black hole at any moment. Now, as if the show couldn't put us in a more uncomfortable place after all the fucked up shit we've seen, things get even more fucked up. Another example of spooky things happening that we can't see occurs when the Ood begin picking up the telepathic messages from beneath the surface. Scooty then comes along, and this is my cue to start running on about how fucking brilliant the music is in these two episodes. There's that beautiful cello piece that plays when Scooty sees Toby outside of the base, indicating there may have been some form of relationship between them before things started going wrong. It also has this beautifully mysterious feeling about it, the solo cello melody that's played as Toby stands impossibly alone outside. The temptation that resides within the Devil and Toby is seen trying to trick Scooty into joining him, but it all comes crashing down as she realizes what he is. When we see her corpse later, the cello returns to bring out the emotion of her death. There are other examples of fantastic musical moments, such as the horrible eerie sound that plays just before something bad happens, the music that often consequently follows Toby with writing all over him, and the chase music that plays during all the life-threatening are some of the most thrilling pieces of music in the entire series. And that's saying something, because Murray Gold's music is often nothing short of excellent, but the tracks for these episodes really are some of my favourites. Zack then proves himself the worst captain ever by allowing a man he has known for probably no more than a few hours go down with Ida to see the chasm itself. Was that hug really that convincing, or did you just get a massive fucking erection instead? Then, as punishment for their misbehaviour earlier, the Ood are deprived of one of their benches by Danny. Seriously, this is the scene earlier when they are getting all fucked up, and then suddenly there's a bench missing. A whole row of Ood had to stand whilst the rest get to sit. The claustrophobia then becomes reinstated as the Doctor and Ida begin travelling down the mine shaft and the Ood begin to rise. It's unfortunate because the two soldier characters we see get murdered by the Ood are the two with the least character depth. All they show is that the Ood can be killed, but the Ood can also kill. I don't really mind this too much because they do at least have a purpose, but there's so little character that we don't even know their fucking names. And then the build-up for the end of the episode begins. Oh my god. When Toby stands up, it sends chills down my spine every time. The change of voice is so striking because it's polar opposite to his usual mumbly, nervous voice. The camera closes in on Zack as he desperately tries to find out what on earth is going on, and then the markings on Toby's face become this gas that takes control of the Ood instead, their eyes turning bright red too. The music begins to increase in pace alongside this grotesque monologue that jumps in and out between dialogue. I honestly would love to hear the entire thing just for curiosity, clarity's sake, really. The spookiest and most genius part of this, however, is the final shot of the episode, where the camera moves its way upward towards the Doctor and Ida. Like earlier with Toby, we see the two from the Beast's perspective, as if something ghastly is about to come out and strike fear into their hearts, only to then cut. It's great because it makes the viewer seriously wonder what on earth the two are looking at, as the camera alludes to the idea of something coming out of that pit. Genius. Absolute fucking genius. So, did it suck? This is one of those near-perfect Doctor Who episodes that I could watch again and again and again, and find more that I love about it in the process. I honestly didn't think I'd manage to get that much out of this episode. It's a shame about the throwaway gun characters and the Ood bench shit, but both are very minor complaints, and are minute in comparison to the amazing qualities of this episode. The story, the atmosphere, the music, the visual and design elements, absolutely fantastic. I give The Impossible Planet a 9 out of 10. The temptation of the devil begins again as the Doctor describes the urge to investigate the pit. The hype surrounding the now open pit kind of falls flat here, but I feel like the hype was there to pull people into this episode, and if the Beast popped out then we wouldn't feel any desire to find out more. The philosophy laid within the story then becomes more direct as the Beast tries to make everyone more afraid of themselves and each other than the devil himself. More importantly, it seems to become this battle of beliefs as the Doctor tries to outsmart the Beast with rational thinking, but even that becomes a belief structure in itself because the Doctor does not know what the universe was like before life came along. It's kind of strange the Doctor hasn't visited the beginning of time, considering he is one of the few people in the universe with a time machine. That'd be one of the first places I'd go to. So the Beast then begins to rattle on about the deep and personal issues the crew have in order to make them lose their shit. Now they really are as cryptic as they come because I really can't seem to find what the relevance of some of these little phrases are. At first I thought, maybe they fit into the 7 deadly sins or something like that. Take for example Mr. Jefferson, where he is asked if his wife ever forgave him in The Impossible Planet, and then is reminded again in this episode that he is haunted by the eyes of his wife. He clearly did something in the past, something unforgivable, like cheating perhaps, which could categorize him as the character that embodies lust. However, some of the other characters don't quite seem to fit into any categories, like Zack, who is afraid of command, Ida, who is still running from Daddy, Toby the Virgin, and Danny as the boy who lied. These are all far too vague for me to be able to point anything down concretely, but the Doctor being the killer of his own kind is quite obvious, as we already know this, and Rose is the one who will die in battle, which is merely foreshadowing the finale of the series. I wish more had been made of these little subtitles, considering these characters had the potential to be intelligently fleshed out. They're more than your basic stock characters, but it's a shame they weren't further developed from this point. So the crew begin making escape plans and the Doctor jumps into the pit. I really love this shot here of the pitch black emptiness slowly swallowing the Doctor as he's lowered deeper and deeper. Once again the claustrophobic tensions rise as the Ood also begin to make their way through the tunnels. I love how they even manage to slip in an arse joke as they wiggle through the tunnels as well. The relocating of oxygen to certain areas also shrinks the amount of space these characters have to an alarmingly small degree. The contrast of huge empty chasms with tightly packed spaces like this one once again brings the scale of the episode to the forefront, adding a flourishing amount of detail to the setting of the story. I feel Mr. Jefferson's death is quite a sad one considering the circumstances he's put in. He is certainly one of the more developed characters in this story considering he left his wife on another planet for this deadly job located in stationary orbit around a black hole. Was it that decision to go that upset her so much? We will never know, but those questions floating around do make him that much more interesting compared to some of the others. As the Doctor descends further into the pit, we have another lovely discussion between Ida and the Doctor about faith and values in general. The Doctor claims that he travels so he can be proven wrong, which is a pretty noble principle to stand on when it comes to the discussion of ideas. He doesn't believe the claim that this form of Satan they're dealing with came before time itself, but time is inherently a human construct, and compared to the age of the universe, humans haven't been around for that long. Perhaps this admittance reflects the large amount of time he spent with humans and not travelled enough outside of his comfort zone, which obviously due to the budget restrictions is a constraint in itself, but perhaps his desire for that kind of knowledge won't make him any happier, but what he thinks to be true isn't perhaps as true as he'd like it to be. His curiosity is what inevitably leads him to release himself from the rope against the wishes of Ida, who would rather not die alone. The battle between emotion and discovery are at odds with one another here and are both represented beautifully by the visuals. The Doctor, surrounded by completely unidentifiable black, delving deep into the unknown, whilst the safety of an ancient culture up above that surrounds Ida gives her the impression that dying alone is a very sad thing to do. However, nobody will ever know if dying alone is as bad as our culture makes it out to be, as nobody has lived to tell the tale of their experience dying alone, so it is almost a selfish endeavour due to humans being so fearful of death. This is why the Doctor insists on continuing, and the episode beautifully presents these ideas through the dialogue and cinematography. The Doctor wakes up in the pit below, and unfortunately our good old friend called Convenience comes along and slightly spoils the scene with the Doctor and Satan. Now, an air pocket cushioning a fall doesn't quite mean much to me, or if such a thing is possible, but the laws of physics and logic aren't really applied in this episode because it is a fictional story. For example, the gravity funnel that pulled the team towards the planet is somehow allowing them to fly against it. So I'm calling Convenience on those, but really I honestly feel this segment in the prison is a bit underwhelming considering the build-up that preceded this scene. As much as a child version of myself would be thoroughly impressed with the gigantic demon that's chained up deep underground, I feel like this is one of those examples where the CG in Doctor Who has aged rather poorly. Sorry, was that supposed to be a laugh? Not only that, but the depiction of this devil is rather predictable in that it is a very human interpretation instead of something more creative and hideous. A different design could have reflected the idea of this creature being older than humanity's perception of time, but for me it just seems to really be a very typical interpretation. The sheer size of this creature is for spectacle and nothing more, because the influence of the devil on individuals and culture is something far greater. To top the whole underwhelming thing off, I love how all it takes for the planet to be thrown into the black hole is just to destroy 2 vases. I mean, come on. If these disciples who imprisoned the beast were able to set up a prison as complex as this, surely it would take a bit more effort to escape than just to have 2 glowing vases set up and destroyed. Toby then provides another terrifying moment as he lashes out in fury before Rose sends him flying outside of the ship and into the black hole, and the Doctor conveniently saves the ship because his species created black holes? Yeah, sure. I totally don't think this is the worst Deus Ex Machina ever created in Doctor Who. So, did it suck? Yeah, this review is a little shorter than the first episode, but that's because I think a lot of the things I talked about in the Impossible Planet review are just as valid in moments of this episode. These reviews certainly got a bit philosophical at points, but I think that's the purpose of these episodes, to challenge the Doctor's own notions of faith, truth, and evil, as well as our own. The Satan Pit is largely positive throughout. This is a pretty solid conclusion to the Impossible Planet, but I don't think it's quite as good because of the last 15 minutes or so of this episode. That's not to say the music, design, and plot are any better or worse than the first part of this story, but the devil itself and the overly convenient ending really spoil this story for me. I give the Satan Pit a 7 out of 10. Maybe I could sit it on my lap. Are the exact opposite, because fuck. And then is swallowed by a hole. Yes, the black hole, that's what I was going to get onto, you knobhead. And then is swallowed by whole reason I've done it again. The sound design of the episode is pretty good too, considering that it can prove on the one tower. I have one tower and it goes everywhere. I was just reading that fucking sentence and the doorbell. Who is at the door? I'm gonna go fucking find out. The temptation that resides within the devil and Toby is in trying to... The temptation that resides within the devil and Toby is in trying to... Oh my god, I said sin again. And that's saying something because Murray Gold's music... Right, so it's fine anyway. Fuck you, Audacity. Fuck you. However... Bloody hell. Once again brings the scale of this episode. As the Doctor descends... Fucking hell. Whilst the safety of an ancient culture, you fuck. Right, we're gonna take a nice big deep breath.